Hey, everybody, it's Craig Fitzgerald, and this is the second edition of the NEMPA DriveStream live stream podcast, whatever this thing is. And our special guest today, we're really psyched about this, is Brian Lohnes from the NHRA and Bang Shift, Hot Rod. You've been everywhere, my friend. So
I've been everywhere.
And George Kennedy is, as always, is my my co-host. So
Howdy.
it's great to see George too.
Pleasure as always.
So Brian, I think my favorite thing about you is how you got started in doing what you do. So it's kind of like my story a little bit too, where it's kind of very DIY punk rock way to get into this business. So tell me a little bit about that, first of all.
Yeah, so always wanted to be an automotive journalist and be involved in automotive media. And, growing up in the 80s, the natural path to that was going to be writing for car magazines. That's really what I always wanted to do. And so for me, it was going to school and getting a journalism degree. Drag racing is a huge part of my life. It's been a part of my life since I was a kid. So, this whole thing really kind of came together in whatever maelstrom that it is right now. But graduated school from UMass with a journalism degree and a commercial driver's license and some experience working in the campus fleet garage, and transferred that into the illustrious world of being a delivery truck driver. There was more money to be made driving a truck than there was writing for the local newspaper. And so from that point, like I did for probably, close to 10 years, I was able to sneak off and do some drag races and meet some people that were connected to magazines. And then I was able to start freelancing for some magazines, and I was able to start turning some of that stuff into some money. And then in 2008, I got hooked up with David Freiberger and Chad Reynolds, and we ended up starting a site that's now known as bangshift.com. And that's been in existence now for 16 years as of November 8th of this year, which is like 100,000 years in internet lifespan. So, and then through all that, I continued on the drag racing side of things and started doing more video work. And, my current, I guess, real job of all this stuff is I'm the lead broadcaster for the NHRA on Fox for the National Hot Rod Association drag racing series. And I still manage to continue to do a lot of other stuff. We're all involved in NEMPA together. So still produce, car reviews and that style of content for Bang Shift. Working on a feature story on Larry Larson right now for Hot Rod Magazine prior to Drag Week. So, it's not the traditional way, but I think there's a lot of value in that idea of having the delayed gratification of being, a person that was trying to find a way to escape like a prison cell. You're doing this job that you hate, but you know where you want to get. So there's some value in that life experience, even though at times it was pretty frustrating.
Well, I remember too, you mentioning that you were involved in some kind of racing thing at UMass too, right? There was like
the
Solo 2 at the time or whatever it was.
So I believe the club still exists, but at the time, I get to UMass and I see this flyer for a motorsports club, and I'm thinking, oh man, this is awesome. Like, I know Lebanon Valley Dragway is only a little ways away. These guys must all be drag racers, and that's great. So I go to the first meeting. As it turns out, these guys have a Volkswagen Rabbit road racing car, which I immediately was like, oh boy, like do I want to hang out with these people? And as it turns out, I'm still friends with every guy I was in the club with. That Volkswagen Rabbit, we raced in a class called ITC, Improved Touring C. And so we raced this thing wheel to wheel at New Hampshire International Speedway, Lime Rock. We would go out to Nelson Ledges, Summit Point, Virginia International Raceway. Like, we towed this thing around, and the school actually gave us a little bit of budget. So we had gas money to put in my buddy Pat's big block truck that dragged this little Volkswagen around. And we made every mistake possible and crashed it every way you can. And as far as the race announcing stuff, as much as I had been around drag racing, I never really even thought about being an announcer. And then the New England region of the SCCA needed somebody to announce these races. And my buddies in the club were like, dude, you got to go do it. Like, you're funny. You tell good stories. I'm like, ah. And so I did it. My very first race I ever announced was the SCCA road race at New Hampshire International Speedway. And the guy running the track at the time, his first name was Jerry, and he just passed away actually a couple of months ago. He was running another track. It might have been out at Eldora or something like that. But long story short, he came up at the end of the first day and he said, you have a lot of enthusiasm and absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And I said, you are right. You are right about that. Apparently, it was very obvious. But that gave me the confidence to contact Lebanon Valley Dragway. So I was doing simultaneously, I was announcing the SCCA races in college. Then I started doing Saturdays at Lebanon Valley, doing test and tune days at a sport I was comfortable and I knew a lot of stuff about.
Yeah.
And then I was concurrently working at Epping in the summer. So that was my real foray into race announcing started when I was late in college. And, just as a little side note, what I think is really cool is Alan Beswick, who is the lead announcer for SRX and has done a lot of stuff and is still around doing everything. He is from Rhode Island. Mike Joy is from Connecticut.
Yeah.
He's the lead announcer for NHRA on for the NASCAR series on Fox.
Right.
And me being the NHRA guy, it's kind of neat that 3 guys from New England, an area that people don't exactly recognize as a racing hub, are broadcasters on the 3 big series in the country.
Wait, so Brian, you with UMass Amherst, right?
Yes.
All right. So what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 2002. In 4 years, I will I always like to stand on that fact. It only took me 4 years to get out of there.
We just missed each other. So I graduated in 2007.
Okay.
4 years, no victory lap.
Yeah.
And what's funny though is that I didn't see much stuff like that, like motorsport club stuff like that. There was a 4x4 club. In fact, a kid from our hometown, like founded like the 4x, like the taco 4x4 club. So like we were into like a lot of different stuff, but like really off-road is where we cut our teeth, namely because once again, we're in the mountains.
Yeah, you're in the woods. Yeah.
For somebody from Eastern Massachusetts, like that's the mountains, right?
It really is.
So I didn't even really know that there was that much exposure to that stuff. And then I guess I'm curious for you, like where for me, it was like, sports car stuff. So like Le Mans stuff,
Sure.
Formula One came later, but it was really 4x4 and sports car racing because the sports car actually looked like cars on the road.
Yes.
More than anything else. Where in this sort of choose your own adventure, where did like drag racing become the thing for you?
I grew up with a dad who raced in the 70s, and I was born in 1980. So his active racing career in the 70s made him a fan. So like when I was really young, he restored a 64 Pontiac GTO, which he still has. And so it's always been the kind of muscle car drag racing stuff. And we used to watch it every week on television when it was on, the old TNN American Sports Cavalcade, or when it would pop up on ABC a couple times a year. And I always just felt connected to the sport because I enjoyed it. I thought it was cool. I having being a really bad hack mechanic, I always enjoyed the mechanical element of it. But, as far as I really enjoy, there is not a form of motorsports that I can't say that I don't enjoy. I really do like it all. And, so it took me to get a little older to gain a more appreciation for, IMSA style racing. And again, I'll go right back to being exposed to it on TV, because the American Sports Cavalcade show that would show drag racing, you didn't know what was coming. Like you flip it on and next week it would be IMSA from Long Beach or something like that. And you're watching these guys and the prototype cars were fascinating to me as a kid, especially in that late 80s when IMSA stood for the International Marijuana Smuggling Association, and the whole thing is funded by like weird, dirty money. And
there's literally a Miami Vice episode about this.
Yeah.
But it's like, but then to me, the thing that fascinated me about the road racing or that style sports car racing culture was like the glamour of it. Like there was a guy named Cyril der Vanderwall that drove one of these cars, and he was a guy from South Africa. I'll never forget it because I remember as a kid, he popped on, he kind of looked like Graham Hill with a little like pencil mustache and stuff. And he had the accent. And I thought, this is awesome. Like, I don't think
the coolest guy ever.
Yeah. I don't think he ever won a damn thing. And I think you were interviewing him because he drove into the pace car or something, but it was like, but when you see a guy named Cyril der Vanderwall, it's like, okay, this may be something I want to pay attention to.
I remember, so my I think you and I have talked about this before. My aunt and uncle, my uncle married my aunt when she was a war bride from France.
Wow. Okay.
World War II. So they came to the United States. She spoke no English. And by the 1970s, when I came along, her English had gotten better, but, thick French accent. And I remember watching the Niki Lauda crash in 1976 in her living room on Wide World of Sports. And Wide World of Sports was like, it could be, Formula One. It could be barrel jumping. It could be, like the International Firemen's Association, roundup where they had drag trucks and then
down on Long Island. Yeah,
the world coordinated water skiing. Like,
yeah. It's so you're right. I mean, like those shows. It's almost like when you talk about music, when radio, like the music that used,
My dogs are saying hello, but carry on.
Yeah. The music that used to be on the radio was much more like, you'd listen to Led Zeppelin and the same station would have the Violent Femmes or whatever, like there was a total range of things that were on the radio, and it was much the same way in television. And I think the compartmentalization of what we're paying attention to kind of ruined things in a lot of ways,
Well, see, I really quick, I'd push back against that because
George, come on.
So like it used to be so hard to find Le Mans, right? Or it's on this network for 6 hours, then it's just off, and then so you get that now with like the Daytona 24, right? And like I still kind of have beef with that network and how it slices up coverage because it doesn't put enough respect on that, right?
Right.
Like Motor Trend does a great job, Fox does a great job because I know where to find you guys. And I know when to find you guys. I think that's important. Like ESPN has made it into like the behemoth that it is. Like that's easy to find. Even when I was a kid, that's probably why I didn't get into ESPN until later, is because it wasn't easy to find. It was on like the Ocho, right? At like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Right. So the yes and no is that yes, there have been, you're able to find your niche and you're able to get really good coverage, like Formula D, like the Drift League had good coverage. And now you've got YouTube channels. Problem is that with all the shaking ups of networks and going to streaming, they want to try and drag people off that and be like, oh, you want to watch this? How bad do you want to watch it? Here's our subscription.
Here's a package for right.
So instead of finding your avenue, they're trying to like juice you.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like, and this goes for everything that we do in the media, whether it's just a standard automotive media, motorsports, whatever. It's like that ability to find it, but also the dilution that comes along with it that we're talking about makes it real interesting. And one of the things that I hear a lot at the races, and it's always from older people, but it's like the kids just don't care about the cars anymore, and it's like, and
dude.
I push back on it very easily. I go, hey, listen, man, I do some events with Cletus McFarland and some of these guys, and like he sold 25,000 tickets last week when I was out with him at Indy, and he'll go to Bristol and do this other stuff. And then secondarily, the one thing I say to all of them is like, listen, when you're a kid, you waited by the mailbox and you got your 2 car magazines a month and you read them cover to cover 10 times. I'm like, my 2 teenage sons consume more automotive content in a day than you got in a month. So stop it with this. They don't, the old guys, with respect to the uncool old guys, don't get it because they think everything.
The Wingadinga old guy.
Yeah, they don't see it, so it doesn't exist, but they don't know where to look for it.
Right.
So I think a great example of this is the Formula One show on Netflix.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And what that did. So I was watching an interview with I can't remember who it was the other day, but they were talking about how Bernie Ecclestone like had no interest in getting more fans into F1, like none. It was like his private club, and that was going to be the way it was. And as soon as the ownership changed or the leadership changed, it was like, we got to get some more people paying attention to this. Now, my 20-year-old daughter, who has expressed zero interest in motorsports whatsoever, is now getting up at 7:00 in the morning to watch races in Azerbaijan. And it's because they've built some personality into this, that didn't exist before, and it's demystified a lot of that part of racing. So, I mean, how are you seeing things like that change now to bring in a much younger, very different audience?
Yeah, it's interesting because the magic bullet and it's like anything in life, people see that series and it's like, we want that too. And IndyCar's tried with 100 Days to Indy, and NASCAR just had a dumpster fire of a series that was just horrendous.
That was Netflix too, right? And it just didn't work out.
It went nowhere. And it was funny because all of the things that made you way more invested and interested in the Formula One series made you look at the NASCAR guys, and it was a miss. I think the direction that the NASCAR people wanted to land was this idea of almost, I say Real Housewives, but that style of thing. It was like this lifestyle show. Like, let's look into the lives of these guys. And then it turns out like they didn't bring
not
any
that interesting.
I didn't. Like I like some of these guys less now from what I learned here or whatever. Versus the F1 show. The F1 show really does, because they hub it around racing and because they hub it around that intensity. And yes, you get some of the lifestyle stuff and you get like these little peaks in there. It certainly has changed, and it's what, it's the bottom line of everything is, we always say it, but like people follow people root for people. Like you're hardcore fan of any motorsport. Like there are a lot of guys who are into F1 because they know and love the technology of the cars, but even that guy is a favorite driver. And like so the interesting thing for me is I've never been an F1 fan either, and started watching the show 3 or 4 seasons ago. I was like, man, this thing is unbelievable, and I learned so much more about the strategy of I think the criticism for years was like, there's no passing, it is what it is, it's a parade lap. And it's like, no, I mean, there's tons of strategy. And the thing that my daughter and I have talked about was like the people who win 7th are psyched that they won 7th. Right.
Like I watched Lewis Hamilton win 3rd and he was like, oh my God, this is like the greatest day of my life, after, really struggling earlier in the season. So, there's a whole different thing to it. And Netflix also does one on Tour de France, which again, zero interest in Tour de France prior to seeing that show, and they handled it very much the same way. So you got a whole new group of people that are interested in these things, and then plus all the TikTok stuff that comes along with it. Like, man, it's fantastic. So
F1 social media is like the biggest thing in the world right now. The memification of F1, and it's basically just slicing up a lot of the stuff from the show. And as somebody who had been into F1 for probably 10 years now, I watched a little bit of the show. I kind of stopped because I only, except for just knowing more about the drivers. Like I didn't really know about Yuki, didn't know about Gunther, but like the tech, I knew about the strategy. I knew about what I kind of couldn't rectify in my head watching this show was I saw this race happen in real time, and they kind of chop up the timeline of how things happen. So I'm like, kind of be like, okay, that didn't happen at that race at all. It's being done for drama.
Yeah.
I'm fine with all that because that's the input thing. Like then you get to my weirdo level.
Yeah.
You're following like Aston Martin strategist on like Formula on Instagram. And now we're talking like tire strategy and undercuts.
Yeah. And it's a perfect example of what Craig talked about. Like they already had their hook in you. They had you already, but they didn't have your daughter.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they kept you and they got her. So it's a double win. And, and sometimes people, which you clearly understand this, George, but like, there's a lot of people that don't understand that, like, not everything is for everyone. Like, not everything is for you. Like, not, and so you don't have to love it. And you can still love the sport without loving that particular show. And to your point, there is a level of understanding and fandom that it's like, I'm a little ahead of this, right? I'm a little ahead of this, and that's fine because as long as they can keep hooking your daughter and the likes of her generation in, it's a freaking huge win.
Well, and I don't want to be a gatekeeper at all, too, but like there is something similar, like I feel like what happened with football, right? Where it got so big that it then started to cater to the casual fan at the expense of the diehard fan.
Yeah.
And I think that happens with any business, any artist, any genre of music. Right? Is that
should have been here 6 years ago.
Yeah, right.
That's really when
I
it was
the
great,
real
man.
ones, you guys. Right. And then they'd be like, so what, dude? Like it doesn't really matter. I mean, is there I guess looking at like drag racing, right? Like sort of where's like the growth of that look like? And like we talked about the media side of things, but also like from the product, like the physical product on the strip and the vehicles used, like what does that look like?
For us, we're the hockey of professional motorsports in America. Okay, so we're a strong third player, and a healthy league, but we're the hockey of racing, and so for the regular fan, like I think you guys are both hockey fans. I'm a hockey fan as well, but like I think hockey fans, as generally speaking, have a weirdly higher level of technical understanding of hockey games than a lot of even baseball or football fans have.
Yeah.
And so for us, George, to your point, one thing that we have a constant battle with is we got to talk to your technically savvy hockey fan, but I got to talk to a guy who's just rocking into the rink for the first time, wondering which end of the ice the puck's supposed to go. And so it's that idea of not offending the person who knows the game inside, outside, and upside down, and then not confusing the game for other people. And as far as the growth end of things go, for me, one of the things that I think drag racing is uniquely positioned to do, and this is probably 5 to 10 years from now, but it is, we've seen obviously the Indy cars have added their hybrid system this year, and that's going to be part of the deal. And logic tells us that if we go from just a straight internal combustion engine, then we start hybridizing the thing. Eventually, there is a next step in this process. That's probably electrification. NASCAR, with their next generation car, is set up to do virtually the same thing. The rear axles in those cars are built to accept a hybrid unit that would be kind of seamless integrated with the driveline. So again, if we're going to take this a couple of steps down the road, why would we hybridize? We'd hybridize because the next step would be a electrification style thing.
Right.
For drag racing, I honestly think in about 10 years' time, you're going to have a sport that delivers you the top fuel experience, the funny car experience, the ear-splitting noise and your eyes watering and your gut shaking around, but also the ability to have in that same format the fastest electric cars in the world.
Yeah.
And so it really, when the other series go one direction, the whole thing has to go that way. So when drag racing evolves and changes, we get to maintain the stuff that really provides a visceral experience to people, but then we also get to employ technological advancements that don't interrupt that other part of it. Each
Right.
part of it can maintain its own kind of classification. So, for me, ideally, what I'd like to see in the next 5 years in our traditional format now is a little bit more manufacturer involvement. All we have in the Nitro funny car category, hilariously, has Toyota, Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge all involved. And their involvement is on aerodynamic design of the bodies. So each of those manufacturers designs the weird looking bodies in those cars. Those are all done with CFD and wind tunnel testing. And then they also all send engineers to the racetrack as well, which is something a lot of people don't know. But Toyota, General Motors, Dodge, and Ford all have dedicated engineers that come to drag races and provide a plethora of information to the teams, whether it's doing some advanced computations, whether it's racetrack reading. They do a lot of different stuff with how the traction either degrades or increases over the course of days. So I want to see more. I want to see on the professional level, I want to see more directly linked OE participation in terms of, we could use a shakeup in some of our higher level classes, Pro Stock specifically, which is a, quote unquote factory style class.
Yeah.
I want to see that get back to factory platform engines. But to me, the biggest thing for drag racing in the next 5 to 10 years to keep guys like my kids interested beyond Nitro funny cars and top fuel dragsters is seeing more stuff that they conceivably could have driven into the racetrack in front of them on a professional level, whether that's Supras with hot rodded B58 motors, whether that's racing Mustangs with Coyotes in it. Like, that's the type of stuff we need more of.
What do you think about like tire manufacturer involvement and like if you're doing EVs saying, okay, well, let's do something close to reality tire so that, there's a place to improve the breed that way. Right.
Yeah. And so for us, the top categories, the top fuel and funny car have a spec tire that they have to run. And those are handmade in a boutique little Goodyear factory in Ohio. It's a pretty wild process. But beyond that, you're 100% right. And so you have, there are 8 or 9 companies that make different variations on drag slicks or drag radial tires. And so those would be a great test bed, all that stuff. And, the one thing that gets lost is, we can show you high level drag racing on TV, but there are 200 plus drag strips open in the country. And every week people are out there running all manner of different wild things down there, EV or otherwise. And so, the sport itself is very strong, and NHRA actually has an EV class that has a national champion every year. First year was last year, and the EV category will be contested again this year. And basically, these are racers from all 7 of NHRA's divisions around the country, compete divisionally, and if you win your division, you get paid to go to Vegas, and then these 7 racers have a throwdown. And it's a sportsman style race, but at this point, in my understanding, we're the only racing series that has any sort of national EV champion in terms of a head-to-head style racing.
Well, it
was really helpful, early on to have Don Garlitz kind of get into this and express his excitement over how fast these things were able to go. It was really great to see him, who is he's synonymous with drag racing for people who are as old as us and older.
Oh no, it was, and to a degree, it made it okay for other people to do it. Once he did it, and went out there, and I think he was trying to go 200 miles an hour desperately in that dragster, and never quite got there. But other people have. But he was the first person to do something like that, and have other people go, okay, if Big Daddy's in on it, then it's cool that I can do it. Then
it's cool, yeah, right. That's the only thing, and it's okay, you can see if you had gone back 75 or 80 years and these were available as a means of going faster, everybody would have been into it, because that's all they wanted to do was go faster. Right. So it's really interesting to see, and I'm glad to see it. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is you talk a lot about, if I follow you on social media, and you're constantly talking about the enthusiasm and the size of the audience for this at some of these events that you do. And it's I didn't realize it. I've gone to, I ran events at Lebanon Valley, and there might be 9 people there, and I've been to Epping, on a Wednesday night where, there weren't that many people there, but these crowds that you're in front of are huge. It's really amazing to see. And I did go to Epping on a national event, and I've never seen that many people in New Hampshire.
It's sneaky in that way, it's kind of funny where, you tell people what you do, or you're on an airplane or something, and oh, people still do that. It's it's just, we just had our biggest race of the season last weekend, the U.S. Nationals, and that race starts on Wednesday and ends on Monday. It's 900 plus cars show up there, and we race 10, 11 hours a day for 6 days straight. And Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we put 45,000 people a day into Lucas Oil Indianapolis Raceway Park. And it's and we're going to Maple Grove, Pennsylvania next weekend. And that's one of our long legacy races, been going there since 69 or 70. And that place is, again, seats a 35, 40,000 seat, stadium, if you will. And that place will be blown out. So, and again, I'm only involved in one small slice of it. And I do a lot of independent events where I go up to Boise, Idaho every year. And actually this place, Firebird Raceway, which is it's a small racetrack, but it seats probably 7,500 people. It's 105 degrees and the place is full, so it's neat to, it's a tough thing to convey to people that there is as much interest in this as there is in so many other things. So it's I don't know, it's cool. And the idea that there are so many of these other smaller events, if you will, that draw big crowds out. Diesel drag racing is enormous. The streetcar takeover style events. There's an event called FL2K, which it used to be TX2K in Texas. The track closed and they moved it to Florida. But, this draws out these guys who do roll racing in these twin turbo Vipers going 250 miles an hour. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Crazy. Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned these other events, because you mentioned this earlier, and that is I feel like what NASCAR may have left in the dirt was these regional tracks.
Yeah.
Right. And you guys are continuing to grow. Like you just mentioned how big that some of these weekends you're at are. And yet NHRA has these events everywhere, every week, in all these different places across the country. I think that's phenomenal. Like that grassroots thing is what keeps people involved, has to be.
And it's the only thing that keeps the sport perpetuating itself, and it's you get these junior dragsters that kids race now, and it's it started out in the early 90s, and, they fit the back of a pickup truck and they have a little Briggs and Stratton engine on them. And the ones that the kids race now, you can still race them that way, but now they have these billet, high compression, single cylinder motors on methanol, and they have to slow them down because they'll go about 100 miles an hour in the 8th mile, and they're not allowed to go that fast. But the reality is, people we run the junior dragsters as part of the big events, and they're raced at every racetrack around the country as part of their normal weekly program. And some of the fans roll their eyes, but it's like, hey, Sean Langdon, world champion junior dragster racer, Leah Pruitt, junior dragster. Yeah. The biggest modern stars in drag racing started in a freaking junior dragster. So to your point, George, if you abandon this idea of the small local racetrack, if you basically pull up your stakes and concentrate only on the big show that's in front of you, you're guaranteed to have the thing atrophy at some point because nobody can find their way there. You have to always have a path for people, however slow it may be, to advance. And that's just not even motorsports. That's just life in general, right? People have to be able
you gotta have a little league, you know?
Yeah.
So one of the things you talked about, Brian, was these legacy tracks, like
Sure.
Maple Grove and one of the things I've noticed, I mean, I think we've all noticed, is that in spite of the popularity, or maybe because of it, the people who live around those tracks really have put a lot of pressure on facilities, to the point where a lot of them are closing. This, and they know they can make money. They can continue to make money, but the fight to keep them open is really challenging. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so this takes on a whole, there's a few different dimensions. There are some racetracks that I've worked at that have closed because they were so poorly managed that they were just bad business and they went out of business. There's other tracks that I've worked at that were on the verge of being shut down by the community because the guy running it had no respect for the community. And thankfully, I'm not going to directly cite a name, but this track is still open because new management came in, new ownership came in, and went to the town and said, hey, listen, let's take a step back here. What can I do to help kind of put some salve on this wound? And, I was at this particular racetrack. I worked there for many, many races, and we'd be 3, 4, almost 5 o'clock in the morning sometimes finishing these events, and there are houses not too far away. And it's one thing to run until 10 p.m. on a Friday night and then call it quits. And it's another thing to be blasting cars into the dark of night at 3 o'clock in the morning when people are trying to sleep. Yeah. That's not good business. And yes, on the other side, we see, for instance, Bandimere Speedway and just outside of Denver, one of the most magnificent drag strips in the country. It's literally built into the side of a mountain. And if you look across the highway, it was always isolated, and they put a highway through there. And this becomes a story of a lot of these places. But massive housing development that every year we'd go back there to get a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And so the Bandimere family ended up selling the racetrack. They were not under direct community pressure to sell it, but they knew they eventually were going to be. And they understood that if we do this now, we're probably going to get a little bit more value out of this property unless they're right up next to us.
Yep.
The good news is the Bandimeres have bought another piece of land out by the airport in Denver and are going to build a new racetrack out there. But that's one of the most modern, one of the most recent, the world closing in around these places.
Yeah.
And that's typically what ends up happening. Epping, New Hampshire was nowhere when they opened it in 1965. And now it has become an area that is desirable for people.
It's a Boston suburb.
Yeah. And this is the story for a lot of places outside of Indiana, which is a unique entity in and unto itself. There are people that buy houses in Indiana to be closer to racetracks. It's awesome. Yeah. Outside of that, it's you need to be a good neighbor as best as you can, while protecting your business. And I think if you bring value to your community, you are going to be okay as a racetrack. If you are a nuisance to your community that does not bring value, that does not have a relationship with the town, that does not open their gates, if you happen to have one of the things a small racetrack out in the Midwest does, they have a large kind of, I don't know, which utility shed, I guess you would call it, but they actually allow the town to use that for town gatherings and meetings and stuff like that. It's little things like that tend to go a long way. So, it's not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon, but it's a problem that needs to be managed and handled the right way. And
there was some sort of rumor, around Epping a year or so ago, right?
Oh yeah, that was a real thing. That was a real thing,
right? Yeah, there was a proposal on the table to sell it.
Yeah, the long story short on that is Epping is very unique among all racetracks of any style around the country because it is a privately held corporation. It is actually owned by racers. So there are stockholders, or 750 shareholders, if you will, at New England Dragway. And so there was a previous executive from the racetrack was trying to pull an end around, and he called a shareholders meeting, and he had a developer guy that was going to come in and invest all this money in the place and do all this stuff. And they were going to have a stock sale, and he was going to try to corner the stocks and become the majority owner, and then, do this work. Thankfully that failed. And the reason it failed was it was a very transparent plan. The developer guy spends a lot of money on the racetrack. 2 years later says, I can't make any money, flattens the place and builds a warehouse on top of it, which that is a desirable place to put an Amazon or a trucking facility. And you're right there on 125. You're right on 95 in 10 minutes. So the coolest thing about this is they have this shareholder meeting. All the people that have shares, whether it's one or a couple hundred, you have to vote. Hundreds of people showed up to the meeting, many of which are second and third generation owners. And it got 10 positive votes. It was roundly defeated. My big concern was, hey, listen, if my great-grandfather was a shareholder in England Dragway, what emotional connection do I have to the place, right? If I'm not somebody actively using it, why wouldn't I just sell these shares for $5,000 or whatever I get for them and go down my way? It was emotional because so many people stood there and said, this is not what my dad wanted. This is not what my grandfather wanted. And it was like, whoa. I mean, it was a very emotional night. It was it was wild.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a lot of that around New England, especially where, I remember summer nights going up to Beach Ridge Motor Speedway and Scarborough, that's gone. And is Star Speedway still there? Is that
Star Speedway? Yeah, Star Speedway is still there. Yep.
Yeah, where's Star Speedway?
It's right next door to
a half mile, that same street as New England Dragway. You just drive past the drag strip on the right, and you're at the circle track. Wow. It's pretty wild. Yeah.
Yeah, so my two grandfathers were both competing popcorn salesmen at Pine Speedway in Haverhill or Groveland, I guess, right? Yeah. So we had a rich history of this. We've got great tracks here. We've seen some tracks do well. We've seen some tracks not do well. So Thompson really picked it up after a while, and Stafford seems to be. Kind of cruising along pretty well, but those are kind of isolated areas too. So,
I have not been there yet, but that new facility they opened up in Palmer, I don't know if either one of you guys have been there.
And once again, when you talk about isolated areas, very lucky, because when you say that, you just mentioned 3 tracks in New England that are really not having to fight this fight right now. Right. How is that possible? They exist in this band that is kind of just I used to live in Norwich, Connecticut when I was working for Consumer Reports. It's called the Quiet Corner, but the locals call it the Forgotten Corner.
It's the banjo band.
If you hear banjo,
it really is the country out there. It's awesome.
Yeah, so Thompson's out that way, and what was the other one that you mentioned was out that way?
Stafford.
Stafford. And so I've been to Palmer. So once again, if you're going out to UMass coming from Boston, that's the exact exit that you would get off at to do that sort of cut through back roads. Route 9-ish back roads to get out there. And it's built into a hillside. It was originally supposed to be a motorcycle, a MotoGP style track. So a lot of elevation change. Yeah. It's meant to be run both ways.
Okay.
But you're in this part of the state that's totally blue collar, totally rural. There's not going to be a lot of encroachment for a really, really long time. Good. And they're really good about interacting with the community, as you said. I went out there on behalf of Car Gurus 6-7 years ago going, hey, can we give you some money to film this BMW M2? And they tried to go, no. You're doing this for free. You're not paying us a dime. Just shout out the track. Right.
Gotcha.
And work some pointers about the track into the place. I'm that's such a good example of how to work those two things together and get
the interesting thing about that place too is it just feels like this is a I think we've all been to places like Monticello, and nothing against Monticello. They got a club going out there. They seem to be successful, but that is for rich people, right? Yeah. That is not for us.
Yeah.
The Palmer, it just is you want something to eat? you should probably bring a cooler with something to eat, because
Good.
we don't have a lot of facilities here.
Yeah.
You want a fancy clubhouse? We don't have that. We got a
There's
construction
a big
trailer over
Y about 10 minutes away
Yeah.
if you want that. Right?
It's very, again, like, you know, kind of your history. It's like very DIY, very, you know, like we're just doing this for us.
Yeah.
And yet it has that community kind of feel to it. So it's great to see that. Yeah.
The biggest anomaly of the year for me is, you know, we race in Sonoma, California. So, you know, Sears Point Raceway, it was Infineon, Sears Point, you can call it whatever you want. But, you know, they race, obviously have a very famous road course there. And the drag strip used to be part of the road course. Now it's independent. It runs right down the middle. But it's like, of all the, when I tell people like, oh, where do you guys go? I'm like, listen, we sell out a drag race with people from San Francisco. Like that is the last place in the universe you think anybody would care about going to see
middle of wine country
or any motorsport. And so it goes back to this idea of the good neighbor, of the good relationship policy, because you got to believe that there's plenty of people that live in Napa or Sonoma that would love to see that place just pitched out of there.
Yeah.
But it's a magnificent facility. It is a great place to go, and more people drive there in EVs and Teslas to watch Top Fuel dragsters than at any place on the planet. Yeah.
So before you know we kind of wrap up with you, I need to mention also that you're like my favorite amateur historian too. Like I'm a regular listener to the Dorkomotive podcast, which is like, you know, it's great. And every time we talk, it's like, hey, did you read this book? And I end up like my to be read pile ends up increasing because of you. But so tell me, you know, what that's all about and where that comes from for you.
Yeah, so the Dorkomotive thing is it's a lot of automotive history. It's also just mechanical history and the history of things and people. I did an episode on the history of the Ferris wheel, which you think would be the most boring story in the world.
Amazing.
I promise you,
that's Eric Larson's book, right? Which is like
Devil in the White City. It's I used his book
World's
for,
Fair,
yeah. And so that's that story of that Ferris wheel. And so, you know, my grandfather wasn't like a traditional like gearhead guy. He loved the logging industry. He loved buildings. He loved building implosions. We used to go travel to watch buildings imploded. He loved it. He loved all that type of stuff. So and he, you know, he was the truck driver for my dad and his business delivering pallets and boxes. So I got a real appreciation for things like, you know, like I was reading these, he had these logging magazines and I would just sit there and read them. And it was like, they would tell stories about these old chainsaws and stuff. And I thought, geez, that's really interesting. And to me, I just think what I appreciate doing in those is spending the time to do the research, but also it's not like some sort of crusade to preserve history, but it's this idea of reminding people in this modern world we live in that's full of amazing things, that there has always been some amazing things. Like that first Ferris wheel carried 2,200 people at a time and was 350 feet tall.
It's insane.
It weighed hundreds and hundreds of tons, and it's like, and it had a steam engine powering it. Like it's crazy. Like the idea of like, I guess to me, it's telling the stories of the analog world, because we're less and less part of the analog world, and that idea of a couple of people sitting down and belting down whiskey at lunch and going, you know what, if we just put a chain the size of put these chain links that are the size of a Volkswagen together and we could drag this ship. I was like, what? And then it works. Yeah. It's like, okay, I guess right. Yeah.
Right. So you know, it's you know, first of all, I whatever the job is, whatever the career path is to logging magazine editor, I would like to follow that path, because man, like, how did these people find out about this stuff? How do you get this job? You know,
but it's like all of us, though. Really, like, you know, I know George loves boats. I know George grew up around boating and sailing. Like, if you grew up and your dad was a logger or something, and you know, like, I'll never forget, like, you know, my dad and grandfather with the pallet business. Like, I will forever remember like what it smells like to walk into their shop on a Saturday morning when I was a kid going to work there, and what it smells like when they would rip 3 pallets of plywood into 48-inch squares. Like, and so if your dad is a logger and he comes home smelling like 2-stroke oil every night, and he's got these cool machines and stories, there's something about that probably hides in the back of your mind, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember watching the movie Sometimes a Great Notion. Do you ever see that?
No.
So that was one of Ken Casey's other
Oh, wow.
Great novel, right? So he wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and wrote this book called Sometimes a Great Notion. And it was about the logging industry in the Pacific Northwest. And Paul Newman was in it, and Jason Robards was in it. And it is a great cast, one of the most grim endings of any movie I've ever seen. But it, like what it exposed me to was how insanely dangerous that industry was, right? And these are the kind of things that when I listen to your podcast, it's like, oh wow, these people were just there was a need for something, and it was like, well, what's the quickest way we can get to this need? Safety be damned, right?
Oh yeah, there was none of that. I mean, that's I don't try to gloss over any of it. Like, I think I talk a lot about some of the stuff, like even I did a episode about the Red Ball Express in World War II, which was like this crazy trucking they came up with this truck route to get the stuff off of Normandy Beach into France to try to keep feeding the front. And like, one of the things nobody talks about, it's like 70% of the guys that drove they were like 70% black guys driving these trucks. Yeah. And it's like this little weird piece of history that no one really talks about, but it's like, that's important. Like, it's important that like they were given this job, and they weren't given the job because it was the best job. They were given the job because nobody else wanted to do it or have their guys do it. And so many of these stories end up being people put in positions that they didn't ask to be put in, but you got to do it at the time. So it's, I'm working on a couple of things now. I got this magazine collection to beat the band, but working on an episode about the history of clutches in top fuel cars. And it's like, it's freaking bonkers, because these guys would blow up and kill these guys in the 60s. And then the next guy would come to the starting line and go run down the racetrack. And no one really asked the question of why that was happening. It just, it was his day to have that problem, and it won't be my day. Bam. Now it's his guy's day. So, yeah, it's a neat.
Yeah, when you see this, and you see, and racing and industry and all that kind of stuff from that period of time, it was like, man, just the insane danger that these people put themselves in every day was. But it came out of. I mean, I told my 95-year-old uncle this. Like, you people never thought, as you were leaping out of off of a Higgins boat to land on Normandy Beach, you didn't think you were going to make it past 30, right?
Yeah, this ain't that bad. Yeah.
Right. So let's smoke, let's drink, and let's drive things as fast as we possibly can. Yeah. Right. So it's crazy. It's a crazy period of time. And I just wanted to mention, I really love the podcast. So,
well, thanks. I have several more episodes I'm going to be uploading. I've been doing a lot of YouTube videos now, so I stripped the audio off of those, and I'm going to upload those as audio podcasts.
Cool. All right. Well, Brian, listen, we've taken up quite a bit of your time, and I know you're.
Listen, I just want to throw one. I want to throw one back at you guys. I want George first. What is the best thing you've driven in the last 2 months?
In the last 2 months, it's the thing that I just got out of, and this is not recency bias at all. I was gonna say the EMC Wolf that we drove with the Ragtop Ramble. That thing is so cool and so raw. Yeah. And then I got into the Nissan Nismo Z. Dude,
yes, I was gonna say the same friggin' thing. Honest to God,
absolute toy.
Yeah,
absolute like
amazing,
fully enclosed 4-wheel jet ski. Yep. And only knocking.
Did you miss a manual transmission in that at all?
I didn't.
I did a little, but not so much when you're just like, this thing feels like once again, like a fully enclosed, Japanese motorcycle, right? Yeah. It was like, and I've always told people, I'm like, this number goes up incrementally, but so do in the cars. They're like, I don't need 700 horsepower. What I need is 350 horsepower in a car that can go around a corner, like in any rate of speed. Yeah. And that's what this car does. It's got oodles of that. It's just so dialed in. It's one of those cars that, like, despite the age of its bones, I mean, that's just the Nissan sports car way right now. Yeah. It feels so hand to glove when you're behind the wheel and the tires are warm. So,
and the wheel, to me, aesthetically too, like the wheel and tire package on that car, like the whole thing looks, and in the white. You stole my answer, because I was actually going to say the same thing. What about you, Craig?
So yes, I will also say that I just got out of this too, and so it is recent in my mind, but I don't think there's anything that I've been more excited about in a while was that EV6 N. I'm
EV6,
Ionic 5N. Absolutely bonkers. Just like who came up with this idea? Like it's just insane because it really reminds me of like the original Golf, the original
Nice.
like the Renault Turbo 2. That feel is like it's right there. I love that.
Okay, cool.
What about you, Brian?
I was gonna say the Z car because it really was that good. And the idea of missing the stick shift to me is only like in the romantic sense. Like there's a part of it's like, man, I wish I was shifting this thing. And then you're on the deck with it. It's like, nah, it's okay. It's okay. Everything's fine now. Yeah. But I'll also throw in the AEV, the AEV Colorado.
Oh, I haven't driven that.
Yeah.
Dude, that thing, and it's like. It was interesting because it spurred this entire debate between my sons, one of which is my son Jack is a diehard Ford kid. He loves, if it doesn't have a blue oval badge on it, it's not the best. And to be a contrarian, his older brother is an everything else guy. And so there was this battle back and forth about like the Ranger Raptor versus this truck. But I will say that AEV Colorado, presence wise and just driving it really was fun, has plenty of power and everything, and it's a very well put together package. It's well beyond just a couple of things glued to it in a lift kit. Like it really is, to me, a really nicely comprehensively done enthusiast off-road truck. So yeah, that was I would say that
with the Multimatic suspension you could literally drive over like a crater. And and then I think my driver notes were like Multimatic everything.
That was
the important Multimatic everything.
Yeah.
So actually, who owns one of those is John Phillips from Car and Driver.
Oh, really?
And I only know this because I was at a Subaru event in Montana, and I actually shared a cabin with John Phillips, and he picked me up in that because he lives out there. And I was like, is this a test vehicle? He's like, no. He's like, I heard about this thing and went out and bought one. Or he drove it apparently and then went out and bought one. And he went over the whole thing with me. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great. And, John Phillips is the guy, and I told him this. He was the guy that convinced me to go out and buy a Roadmaster estate wagon.
Yes.
He had that Caprice wagon and just sang the praises of it for like years in the magazine. So it is really a great thing to kind of hear from him that he was enthusiastic about that.
Dave, cool. This guy, Dave, who owns AEV, is a great guy. I met him years ago, and we've maintained some communication. I sent him a photo, and the week I had the truck, I said, "Hey, I got a piece of your handiwork here." And he's like, "Have you done this with it? Have you tried this with it? Have you done?" I'm like, Dave, somebody else has to drive this. So I said, "No, I have not attempted to float it across to Europe yet. I'll leave that to you." But it's cool, man. Guys, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate it, and you're the busiest guy I know. So keep working at it.
I swear I'm not wearing pajama pants right now, so I'm working hard.
It would be totally acceptable if you did with our podcast.
Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Brian.